Look at the left side of the screen. Mark Zuckerberg ready to testify before 2 Senate committees.
Fox News Alert, big day in our nation's capital with the White House briefing this hour while President Trump doesn't rule out firing special counsel Robert Mueller. And Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg is about to take some very tough questions on Capitol Hill. Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, and this is the Daily Briefing. The Facebook founder seeking a connection with Senate lawmakers while they set their sights on a massive privacy scandal and how Russians use the social network to influence American politics. We've got you covered with Daniel Henninger and Shelby Holliday from the Wall Street Journal, former Microsoft exec Mark Penn in D.C., plus analysis from Bret Baier, the anchor of Special Report. But we begin with House Energy and Commerce Chairman Greg Walden, who will be asking questions of Zuckerberg tomorrow on the House side. This is a big deal, Congressman. Really, since 1996 and the Telecommunications Act of that year, which was big sweeping changes, the committee really hasn't tackled anything this big since then. How do you plan to focus 31 members tomorrow to try to get the questions you want answered at that hearing?
That's just on the Republican side, you know. So it's a big committee, it's a big issue, and it's bigger than just Facebook, by the way. How people profit from your personal data goes well beyond Facebook, and we'll be looking at this over time. But tomorrow, it is about Facebook. It is about Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of this great innovative company. But what happened along the way? What were people's expectations? What were the agreements? Did they keep their side of the bargain? These are the trust questions I think American consumers had, and our job is to put the consumer first and make sure these big companies do what they say they were going to do, and if not, does it invite the opportunity or the need for some sort of public policy involvement here?
Sir, last week when I headed out to Facebook to interview Sheryl Sandberg, I talked to many people from all walks of life, including some members of Congress from both sides of the aisle. And what I realized is that there are many people who are very angry at Facebook, but none of them seem to be mad at Facebook for the same reasons. Is there something that you're particularly looking to get tomorrow that will help focus the mind on any particular type of legislation or regulation that you think is necessary?
Yeah, Dana, I think it's about transparency and it's about accountability. That's how you build trust. And when it comes to online platforms such as Facebook, what was their transparency regarding how they would use your data, by the way, not their data, your data, and did they follow it? Are they accountable? Are they accountable to the agreement they reached back in 2011 with the Federal Trade Commission when there were issues about data security, data usage, that they entered into an agreement? Did they follow the terms and conditions? And by the way, does anybody read those little click things that say, I agree to all the principles and the multi-pages of legalese about what they can and can't do? I think consumers are kind of left in the dark about what happens with their data until something like this happens where a violation of public trust occurs. That's our job then, to get to the facts, get to the truth, and then come to a decision about what kind of public policy changes need to be made, if any.
Congressman, I'm sure you're familiar that a lot of Republicans and conservatives are frustrated with Facebook. They think there is a bias against them, and especially when it came to the new algorithm that they put in place in the news feed. What can Facebook do to rebuild that trust?
Well, that's a big question. You know, when you go back to the Organizing for America, the Obama 2012 campaign, the way they used apps to scrape data, I think in an unprecedented fashion. Now, Facebook changed its policies after that, but not before President Obama used all those data, and OFA used it and probably still has it. And then you look at the algorithms they're using to sort things out. They ought to be based on First Amendment free speech rights, not something that they've cooked up themselves, probably. That's a question we'll have for Mark Zuckerberg. And so these are the issues of our day. Are they a common carrier in the information age? Are they a digital platform that just provides a wonderful service for free? Or is it really for free, given that they monetize your data? I mean, there's a goods and services exchange that occurs here. Are consumers fully informed about that exchange? And are they playing by the rules they set?
Mark Zuckerberg was on the Hill the past couple of days just trying to assuage some fears, I think, of members of Congress in terms of what Facebook is planning to do. He's apologizing up one side and down the other. This just posted from him on his own Facebook page. He said, "In an hour, I'm going to testify in front of the Senate about how Facebook needs to take a broader view of our responsibility, not just to build tools, but to make sure those tools are used for good. I will do everything I can to make Facebook a place where everyone can stay closer with the people they care about and to make sure it's a positive force in the world." One of the things that they always say, and this will be my last question for you, I know you have a busy day, Facebook always says it's very idealistic and it's very optimistic type of company. But is that about to meet with some real cynicism from members of Congress?
Look, Dana, look, this company's been around not 15 days, but 15 years. It has 2 billion users. It's one of the biggest economic engines in the social media world, in fact, in the whole technology world. So you can't just say, oh, I'm idealistic and I made a mistake. I do think he's being smart. He's taking the responsibility. The buck does stop with him. He's the biggest single shareholder, has controlling interest, and he's created an incredible platform that's changed the world and connected people. But with that comes enormous responsibility on a company of that size to do what it says it's going to do, to follow the rules, follow the law, do what it says it will do to help consumers, and that's what we're going to get to the bottom of. So, and remember, the lens is bigger than just Facebook. A lot of other companies out there engaged in actions that consumers are concerned about.
Well, then, since you bring that up, will you be asking companies like Twitter and Google to come testify too?
Well, I think there are issues that come to our attention from our consumers, our voters, about those companies as well. And so we're not ruling it out.
All right. Congressman Greg Walden, Chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee, thank you.
Thank you, Dana.
And as we wait for Mark Zuckerberg's testimony, let's bring in the anchor of Special Report, Bret Baier. This hearing was really going to take up a lot of the time and attention of the week. I want to get to the other issues, but before I do that, let me just ask you what the feeling is like down there in terms of Mark Zuckerberg testifying for the first time in front of Congress.
You know, Dana, I covered a lot of hearings, a lot of these hearings on Capitol Hill. There hasn't been this kind of line to get into a hearing for quite some time. I'm talking big hearings that were much anticipated. This seems to be generating a lot of attention and a lot of a focus of not only lawmakers but the people who cover Capitol Hill. I think the real takeaway, and you talked about this with Congressman Walden, is what does regulation of social media, of Facebook and others, look like? And if that's the case, if that's the road that Congress is going down, you know, we're opening up a whole new door here about regulation of the Internet. And I think that there's going to be a lot of back and forth about what the end product looks like if that's what happens.
And if we know anything, it's that Washington moves a lot more slowly than technology, for sure. We're taking a look at that line that you mentioned of people trying to get in for this hearing. But, of course, you can watch it live here on Fox News as soon as it starts. Meantime, Chuck Grassley, not only the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, who is talking about Facebook, but he also spoke with Maria Bartiromo this morning about the other big news, and that is in regards to the investigation of Robert Mueller, the raid yesterday of the president's attorney, Michael Cohen. Listen to what he said to Maria this morning.
I have confidence in Mueller. The president ought to have confidence in Mueller. And I think, to answer your question, it would be suicide for the president to want to talk about firing Mueller. The less the president said on this whole thing, the better off he would be, the stronger his presidency would be. And I think that maybe Mueller coming to a dead end as far as collusion of Trump with Russia in this election.
Bret, a lot of people do try to reach President Trump through their appearances on television. What do you think that President Trump hears when he hears that all these people think he should not fire Mueller, but it is within his power to do so?
Right. I think there are a lot of lawmakers, a lot of senators warning about that. There are some saying they're not concerned that he's going to go down that road because he knows the consequences of that. Here's the thing. We don't know what we don't know about the Mueller investigation. It's being reported that the Cohen raid, the raid on Michael Cohen's office and apartment, hotel, was in regard to the payments of hush money payments and possibly some inquiry into the National Enquirer and how that played into pre-election activities that Cohen took place in. And we don't know the tie, if there is one, to the Mueller investigation. It's being reported now that the attorney, the U.S. attorney in the Southern District, recused himself. And that's the Trump guy. So here you have another recusal potentially, just like the president has a problem with Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General's recusal. I think that we have a long way to go to get more facts about this particular raid, but clearly the signals from Capitol Hill are, don't fire Mueller, it would cause a lot of problems.
Meantime, there's also the story that everybody's following in regards to reaction to Syria and what might happen there. At the president meeting with his military leadership yesterday, Nikki Haley at the United Nations, pushing back against the use of chemical weapons against those innocent civilians. Do you hear anything more about what could possibly happen from our end today?
Well, I think that from that cabinet room where a lot of the focus was on the raids and his comments on Mueller, the other thing that came out of it was that there will be a decision in hours, possibly within the day, and that they are confident or have solid intelligence about who was behind that. That's from President Trump. Since then, I've talked to various officials who feel like there is an increasing confidence that they know who was behind the chemical attacks, and there are indications that there's some military move potentially in the next 24 to 48 hours.
Can I ask you just on that, on the evidence that and what we might be able to find out about it? I'm cautious because I know things are classified. But people are going to want some proof that it was the Assad forces that did this. Is that what you're hearing, that there is that proof exists?
I've been invited to a couple of background briefings in the next day, so I think that they're probably getting it all together, and you know the drill. They brief anchors and reporters with what they can outside of a classified environment in order to make the case firmly before some action happens.
Well, it's good to know that you are invited, because we will invite you then back here to tell us more about it. All right, Bret Baier, thank you.
Thanks.
So Mark Zuckerberg just arriving on Capitol Hill to testify before a joint Senate committee moments from now. Up next, our panel weighs in on the questions he can expect.
Many of us on this committee have been raising this issue since the beginning of this year. And our claims were frankly blown off by the leaderships of your companies. Your companies know more about Americans in many ways than the United States government does.
Fox News Alert, a look inside the hearing room where Mark Zuckerberg is about to testify before a joint Senate committee. With me now, Wall Street Journal deputy editorial page editor Dan Henninger, and Shelby Holliday, the Wall Street Journal's senior video reporter, and from D.C., Mark Penn, former executive vice president and chief strategy officer at Microsoft and author of the new book, Microtrends Squared. This is a day that I think Mark Zuckerberg maybe didn't... I think maybe he knew that it would come, Dan, that this would, at some point it would happen, that a day of reckoning for a company this size, now 15 years old, would have to face the music. Take a listen today to what Kara Swisher said on the NBC's Today Show.
I think a lot of people with this boy genius stuff, he's 33 years old and he has 2 children. We have to stop calling him a boy. And he's a billionaire who runs a major company. And so I think this idea that we sort of juvenilize these men from Silicon Valley as if they don't have responsibility is kind of ridiculous.
Dan, he is going to have to face the music today.
He is going to face the music for sure. I would agree with Kara Swisher to the extent that I sometimes think of Mark Zuckerberg as like the fellow who discovered the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. I mean, there he is sitting in his dorm room at Harvard University dreaming up Facebook. Others could have come up with the same idea. He attached that to a technology called the Internet, and the next thing you know, he's the 6th richest man in the world with 2 billion customers. I mean, there's something about the nature of this technology, its breadth, its power, its exponential power, that we have never seen before. And this one made Mark Zuckerberg extremely wealthy. And now he is sitting here in front of Congress, supposedly to apologize and be contrite. And in the advance of this hearing, I'd like to just issue a little bit of skepticism. What exactly is the problem that we are sitting here to discuss and hear about today? Is it privacy? Obviously, it's connected to Cambridge Analytica, but is the issue that there was privacy that was compromised by individuals, or is it that this was used by Cambridge Analytica and others to elect Donald Trump president, which is two separate issues?
And Shelby Holiday, there's another issue, and that is just the sheer size of Facebook and what kind of company Facebook is. It was the startup darling of the world, but now there's questions because of its power as a news publisher, really. Right. Is it a media company? Listen to what Sheryl Sandberg had to say about that.
We're working really hard on false news. People want accurate information on Facebook, and we want them to have accurate information. So what we're doing is we're working with third-party fact checkers, everyone from the AP to the Weekly Standard. We have people in all 50 states now ahead of the election. Our goal is always to be a platform for all ideas. We are running a service that 2 billion people use, right? We work in a bipartisan way.
Shelby, the sheer size and scope of this company leads you to believe that the members of Congress are probably going to ask them if Facebook is too big.
Yeah, that's a key question, and that interview was really insightful because the answer Facebook has given to this question, are you a media company, are you responsible for what's published on the platform, has changed a lot over the last year. They do not want to be sort of this overseer of content. They didn't want to fact check. They didn't think it was their job to police free speech. But now we're hearing more and more that they do care about this, and this is important. The reason why is because the value of Facebook lies in trust. Users trust, they trust Facebook to put their pictures up there. They trust Facebook enough that they put their birthday and they share things with their friends, even messages, private messages to people that you know. And so if that trust falls apart, the model of Facebook falls apart, and so does the value of Facebook. Now, we all say that they're on the hot seat. Mark Zuckerberg's on the hot seat today, and this is a key moment. He didn't want to be here in the first place. A few weeks ago when he addressed Cambridge Analytica, he really backed away from the idea that he needed to be here. Now he's here. Lawmakers will definitely want to ask him tough questions, but I did get an email from a venture capitalist earlier, and he said, it is a hot seat, but it's also a tremendous opportunity to profess democratic values, to remind people what Facebook stands for, and to remind, I mean, I don't know if people will want to hear how incredible of a company Facebook is, but he certainly has an opportunity to be the leader, and to Kara Swisher's point, to be the man, you know, this responsible CEO leading this company, not the guy from his dorm room.
Mark Penn, today you had an op-ed in the New York Times in which you said, as social media distribution of news, real and fake, mushroomed, government authorities neglected to give these changes the same careful study they gave to TV and radio when those technologies were new. Despite its government roots and public funding, the internet has been treated like a private commercial network. Now is the time to reconsider that approach. And to Shelby's point there about trust, there's a Monmouth poll asking, is Facebook doing enough to stop the spread of fake news? Not doing enough, up at 69%. I know you know a lot about polling. How are they doing on that front?
Well, I think they've gone very much on an apology tour as a strategy, quite different. You know, history seems to repeating itself because I worked with Bill Gates when he was called before Congress. Look, this is going to be, I think, a relatively tough setting for Mark Zuckerberg. It's one of the first times he's asked questions that are fully not in his control. I think there'll be a number of cross currents here. I think interest in news, interest in Cambridge Analytica, interest in privacy. His advantage is that no one has a clear kind of ability to develop questions. The public basically is in the dark about technology platforms. They don't understand what news is moved, how it's moved, how much power there is in this data. I think in the op-ed I say, well, look, you know, you can't have Facebook both be a common carrier and a media company. It's got to choose, and probably we should really have channels, right, who are really responsible for their content, right, that are promoted rather than Facebook directly hiring 20,000 people to act as censors. That's unprecedented.
Mark, I'm going to ask you, Shelby, and Dan Henninger to stick around with me. We are going to be right back. Much more on the testimony any minutes now from Mark Zuckerberg, what he needs to tell lawmakers about the massive data mining scandal. We'll be right back. Stick with us, and the panel will be here too. Zuckerberg, in the wake of his company's privacy scandal, Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is live on Capitol Hill. Mike, what is the prep work like for these lawmakers heading into a high-profile hearing with limited time in the spotlight?
Well, Dana, it's pretty intense is what I'm told, and they have very limited time, so they really need to get to the point in a hurry. I'm told there are conversations and conference calls between the senator, issue experts on staff, and the communications team about possible areas they could explore with questioning. The lawmakers are then provided with background packets from their team about those various issues they could explore, and some are suggesting today's hearing is really just the first start of congressional oversight.
Facebook has been slow to take needed steps to make changes to its platform to empower average Americans to know what of their data is being used and for what purpose and by whom. I think the Senate and the Congress is going to need to have a series of hearings and to act to strengthen privacy.
Since this is the first time Mark Zuckerberg has testified on Capitol Hill, if lawmakers hear a lot of questions about a particular area, they could quickly shift to another area of interest. A lot of ground to cover here this afternoon. Dana.
Mike, do the senators meet ahead of time to sketch out how they're going to divide up the questioning, or do they get to do whatever they want?
In some cases, I'm told they do meet to try to avoid a whole lot of overlap. It's not entirely clear if they did ahead of this one. You've got some 40 or so senators between the two committees that will be questioning him this afternoon. But bottom line, I'm reminded that a lot of the members of the Senate Judiciary panel are attorneys, and so they intend to listen very carefully to what their colleagues ask and either dig deeper with their questions or perhaps shift on the fly. And some are questioning whether this is basically a time that Congress must add new regulations.
I come in peace. I don't want to have to regulate Facebook. Clearly, though, we have a problem. I mean, the digital promised land has some minefields in it. And one of those minefields is the protection of people's privacy. Now, I want to hear 3 words from Mr. Zuckerberg. I'm on it.
The stakes are incredibly high for Mark Zuckerberg. A poor performance could hurt share prices of Facebook stock, could also invite the government into his business. Dana.
All right, Mike, thank you. And let's bring back our panel, Daniel Henninger, Shelby Holliday, and Mark Penn, who are with me now. One of the things, Dan, that I wanted to ask about is something that Andrew Ross Sorkin wrote about in the New York Times today in his column. He said, the reality is that when it comes to privacy, the trade-off has already been made. We decided long ago to give away our personal information in exchange for free content and the ability to interact seamlessly with others. Politicians can scream from the rooftops about privacy, and they should, but the public has proved over and over again that it doesn't care. And Dan, I think he was pointing to also with breaches of security when it came to airlines or credit card companies, it really is not that big of a factor in hurting those businesses because consumers keep going back.
Well, I essentially agree with Sorkin's analysis. I think, by and large, people don't care. I mean, let's go to the beginning of this problem with Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. Supposedly it was when a Cambridge University researcher, Alexander Korda, he made an app in which he solicited people to contribute their psychographic profiles. You know how many people voluntarily submitted that information to him? 300,000, an extraordinary number. And now their information was then shared extensively, their associates, their friends, and so forth, and that was what was essentially stolen by Cambridge Analytica. But nonetheless, the fact is, most people, I think, are pretty happy with the product they're getting from social media and from Facebook. If they were more concerned about their privacy, we would have had a problem long before this. I'm more concerned by what we also alluded to, which is the hacking of things like Equifax or the Office of Personnel Management. That was 21 million very confidential files. Now, the question is, has anything ever come of those hacks? The idea is they've got your social security number and the rest of it, but I have never seen any evidence that something bad has happened as a result.
Panel, stay with me here. Mark Zuckerberg has entered the hearing room, and the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa, is there as well. So we anticipate that this is going to be one of those hearings that actually starts on time. I was trying to remember the last time such a big hearing took place. Dan and I were talking possibly the Benghazi hearings when Hillary Clinton testified 2 years ago or so. But right now, Mark Zuckerberg, his first time on Capitol Hill to testify. He spent most of the day yesterday meeting with members of the Senate, talking to them in advance of this testimony in which we know he is going to apologize. He has an opening statement that he released yesterday. And also, Shelby Holiday, since you're here with me now, one of the things I think that he's going to ask about, and you'll see a big partisan divide, is that Democrats are going to be very focused on the timeline as to when Facebook knew that Russia was trying to meddle in the 2016 election through using Facebook. Do you anticipate that as well?
Yes, that's a huge question. What did Zuckerberg know? When did he know it? And if he knew it early, why wasn't he very transparent with users? There's a big debate about free speech here, and I spoke to Senator Lankford, a Republican, in the past few weeks, and he said Congress doesn't feel like it needs to compel these social media companies to tell the public. It actually wants the social media companies themselves to release information to the public. And so what Facebook has done is release a lot of information to Congress, but we in the public still don't necessarily know about it, and a lot of Americans have been left in the dark.
And Shelby, the senator there, is trying to pound the gavel, telling everybody to get ready as he is about to turn this hearing over to Mark Zuckerberg for his opening statement after he is sworn in, and I anticipate they'll get all the cameras out of the way. It must be sort of strange, Dan. We're talking about him in the dorm room, getting ready, and now the sixth richest man in the world. And we'll turn this over now to Senator Chuck Grassley, Mark Zuckerberg's first testimony in front of Congress.
Facebook's social media privacy and the use and abuse of data. Although not unprecedented, this is a unique hearing. The issues we will consider range from data privacy and security to consumer protection and the Federal Trade Commission enforcement, touching on jurisdictions of these two committees. We have 44 members between our two committees. That may not seem like a large group by Facebook standards, but it is significant here for a hearing in the United States Senate. We will do our best to keep things moving efficiently given our circumstances. We will begin with opening statements from the chairman and ranking members of each committee, starting with Chairman Thune, and then proceed with Mr. Zuckerberg's opening statement. We will then move on to questioning. Each member will have 5 minutes to question witnesses. I'd like to remind the members of both committees that time limits will be and must be strictly enforced given the numbers that we have here today. If you're over your time, Chairman Thune and I will make sure to let you know. There will not be a second round as well. Of course, there will be the usual follow-up written questions for the record. Questioning will alternate between majority and minority and between committees. We will proceed in order based on respective committee seniority. We will anticipate a couple short breaks later in the afternoon, and so it's my pleasure to recognize the chairman of the Commerce Committee, Chairman Thune, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley. Today's hearing is extraordinary. It's extraordinary to hold a joint committee hearing. It's even more extraordinary to have a single CEO testify before nearly half of the United States Senate. But then Facebook is pretty extraordinary. More than 2 billion people use Facebook every month. 1.4 billion people use it every day. More than the population of any country on earth except China, and more than 4 times the population of the United States. It's also more than 1,500 times the population of my home state of South Dakota. Plus, roughly 45% of American adults report getting at least some of their news from Facebook. In many respects, Facebook's incredible reach is why we're here today. We're here because of what you, Mr. Zuckerberg, have described as a breach of trust. A quiz app used by approximately 300,000 people led to information about 87 million Facebook users being obtained by the company Cambridge Analytica. There are plenty of questions about the behavior of Cambridge Analytica, and we expect to hold a future hearing on Cambridge and similar firms. But as you've said, this is not likely to be an isolated incident, a fact demonstrated by Facebook's suspension of another firm just this past weekend. You've promised that when Facebook discovers other apps that had access to large amounts of user data, you will ban them and tell those affected. And that's appropriate. But it's unlikely to be enough for the 2 billion Facebook users. One reason that so many people are worried about this incident is what it says about how Facebook works. The idea that for every person who decided to try an app, information about nearly 300 other people was scraped from your service is, to put it mildly, disturbing. And the fact that those 87 million people may have technically consented to making their data available doesn't make most people feel any better. The recent revelation that malicious actors were able to utilize Facebook's default privacy settings to match email addresses and phone numbers found on the so-called dark web to public Facebook profiles, potentially affecting all Facebook users, only adds fuel to the fire. What binds these two incidents is that they don't appear to be caused by the kind of negligence that allows typical data breaches to happen. Instead, they both appear to be the result of people exploiting the very tools that you've created to manipulate users' information. I know Facebook has taken several steps and intends to take more to address these issues. Nevertheless, some have warned that the actions Facebook is taking to ensure that third parties don't obtain data from unsuspecting users, while necessary, will actually serve to enhance Facebook's own ability to market such data exclusively. Most of us understand that whether you're using Facebook or Google or some other online services, we are trading certain information about ourselves for free or low-cost services. But for this model to persist, both sides of the bargain need to know the stakes that are involved. Right now, I'm not convinced that Facebook's users have the information that they need to make meaningful choices. In the past, many of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle have been willing to defer to tech companies' efforts to regulate themselves. But this may be changing. Just last month, in overwhelming bipartisan fashion, Congress voted to make it easier for prosecutors and victims to go after websites that knowingly facilitate sex trafficking. This should be a wake-up call for the tech community. We want to hear more, without delay, about what Facebook and other companies plan to do to take greater responsibility for what happens on their platforms. How will you protect users' data? How will you inform users about the changes that you are making? And how do you intend to proactively stop harmful conduct instead of being forced to respond to it months or years later? Mr. Zuckerberg, in many ways, you and the company that you've created, the story you've created, represent the American dream. Many are incredibly inspired by what you've done. At the same time, you have an obligation, and it's up to you, to ensure that that dream doesn't become a privacy nightmare for the scores of people who use Facebook. This hearing is an opportunity to speak to those who believe in Facebook and to those who are deeply skeptical about it. We are listening, America is listening, and quite possibly the world is listening too.
Thank you. Now, Ranking Member Feinstein.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Grassley, Chairman Thune. Thank you both for holding this hearing. Mr. Zuckerberg, thank you for being here. You have a real opportunity this afternoon to lead the industry and demonstrate a meaningful commitment to protecting individual privacy. We have learned over the past few months, and we've learned a great deal that's alarming. We've seen how foreign actors are abusing social media platforms like Facebook to interfere in elections and take millions of Americans' personal information without their knowledge in order to manipulate public opinion and target individual voters. Specifically, on February the 16th, Special Counsel Mueller issued an indictment against the Russia-based Internet Research Agency and 13 of its employees for interfering operations targeting the United States. Through this 37-page indictment, we learned that the IRA ran a coordinated campaign through 470 Facebook accounts and pages. The campaign included ads and false information to create discord and harm Secretary Clinton's campaign. And the content was seen by an estimated 157 million Americans. A month later, on March 17th, news broke that Cambridge Analytica exploited the personal information of approximately 50 million Facebook users without their knowledge or permission. And last week, we learned that number was even higher, 87 million Facebook users who had their private information taken without their consent. Specifically, using a personality quiz he created, Professor Kogan collected the personal information of 300,000 Facebook users and then collected data on millions of their friends. It appears the information collected included everything these individuals had on their Facebook pages, and according to some reports, even included private direct messages between users. Professor Kogan is said to have taken data from over 70 million Americans. It has also been reported that he sold this data to Cambridge Analytica for $800,000. Cambridge Analytica then took this data and created a psychological welfare tool to influence United States elections. In fact, the CEO, Alexander Nix, declared that Cambridge Analytica ran all the digital campaign, the television campaign, and
we are going to continue to listen to the opening statements, but in the meantime, Sarah Sanders at the White House just started her press briefing, and we'll turn it over to her as well.
Just one more question, Sarah. If the president
I'm going to keep it fair. Go ahead, Kristen.
Then why didn't he instruct?
I'm going to move on to Kristen. Sorry, we are tight on time with the visit of the Alabama team coming up soon. Go ahead.
Well, just can you follow up on that question? Does he continue to deny having an affair?
Then why doesn't he just?
The president's been clear. He's addressed this several times. I don't have anything else to add. Brian?
I'd like to follow up. Ask my other question. Can you just say definitively, has the president had any conversations about firing Jeff Sessions, Rod Rosenstein, or Robert Mueller in the past 24 hours?
I haven't had any conversations with him on that. I can't speak beyond that. Sorry, Kristen, we've got to keep going, guys.
He called it a witch hunt, but Rod Rosenstein, whom he appointed, signed off on the
lady
probe.
going to do it.
Go ahead.
Well, I answer her. Go ahead, Kristen.
Can you just answer the question? If the president appointed Rod Rosenstein, and so how can he call the raid yesterday a witch hunt when it was approved by the Deputy Attorney General he appointed?
Once again, I'm not aware of what the process is and who signs off on those specific types of things. The president certainly has been very clear about what his position is when it comes to matters of collusion, and that's what his reference is. He thinks this entire thing is a witch hunt. I think we've spoken about this at length, ad nauseum, and frankly think it's a big distraction that the media has spent every single day for the last year focused on this instead of some of the biggest issues of our day and some of the biggest issues that the president is dealing with, like Syria, like North Korea, like deregulation, tax cuts, defeating ISIS. That's the focus of this administration, and frankly that's what you guys should spend a little bit more time on. Hey guys, time out. You yielded your time to Kristen. I'm going to go to John.
Please, if I
Sorry.
may, just to follow up.
All right, I'll come back to you, Brian, for one.
Thanks. You had said
I'm feeling generous today for Nadia's birthday.
Just two quick ones. You said that it's a witch hunt, and you've continued to characterize it as that. But not so much as this administration also has leveled sanctions against the 13 Russians that were indicted by the Mueller investigation. In some point, are you a party to this witch hunt, or is some of it at least a legitimate effort?
Just because there may have been involvement by Russia doesn't mean there was involvement by the Trump campaign. And to try to conflate the two is insane.
No, that's not the question. The question is, in some ways, aren't you at least supporting what they've done? Because they've indicted some of the people that you have leveled sanctions against. So you're in agreement with Mueller in at least some regards, right?
We've been outspoken on a number of occasions that we think that Russia was involved in election meddling, and we've taken actions because of that. But that has nothing to do with whether or not the president and his campaign had anything to do with that.
And then
I'm not. Sorry, I'm going to keep moving. John, I called on John before. Guys. One at a time. Go ahead, John.
Thanks a lot, Sarah.
Sorry, right here.
Thanks a lot, Sarah.
Kind of crazy today.
What is the nature of the president's relationship right now with Attorney General Jeff Sessions? He really voices his pleasure with him last evening in his remarks. Is it a good relationship? Does he risk being fired right now?
I think the president was pretty clear about his frustrations when he spoke about that last night. Michael?
One other one, real quick, Sarah, if you don't mind. It's about the EPA administrator, Mr. Pruitt. If it turns out that he lied in the interview that he gave with Fox News, my colleague Ed Henry, would that be problematic for him in terms of holding on to his job?
I'm not going to get into hypothetical situations, but certainly the president would expect all members of his cabinet to be honest and certainly open with the public. Michael?
So the president last night seemed to combine his reaction to the Russia investigation, which we've heard him say before, and this new investigation that has grown out of the raids in New York of his attorney. Does he view that as one and the same investigation? In other words, does he think that's all kind of under the umbrella of the special counsel, or does he view the Russia investigation as separate from the probe into the payments by these women that is apparently being conducted by the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York?
I think certainly that they are separate investigations, but I think that publicly they have been conflated quite a bit. Steve?
Yes, Sarah. Does the United States expect that in a response to the Syria chemical weapons attack that other nations will join in? Specifically, we're seeing indications from France and the Saudis that they may also take military action.
We've had a number of conversations, both the president with President Macron, Prime Minister May, and at various other levels, not just with those countries, but others at an administration level. And we're going to continue to work with a number of our partners and allies as we determine what the next best steps are. April?
Sarah, two questions. The president said yesterday he was compliant. They turned over 1 million documents. If he was compliant with these investigations, why was there a search warrant needed?
This doesn't have anything to do with the president. I would refer you to Michael Cohen and his attorney. When it comes to matters of the special counsel and dealings with the president, we've been fully cooperative.
Okay, and the next question. With all of this turmoil, particularly this last week, has the president at any time thought about stepping down before or now?
No, and I think that's an absolutely ridiculous question. I gave you 2 questions, April. We're moving on. Jordan, go ahead.
It's not ridiculous.
Jordan, go
Thanks, Sarah. Did the National Security Advisor, John Bolton, force Tom Bossert out of his job?
I'm not going to get into specific details about the ongoings of personnel, but I can tell you that he resigned. The president feels he's done a great job and wishes him the best as he moves forward.
Sarah, the president tweeted favorably today about some of the promises that President Xi has made toward instituting some market reforms in China, but he's said this before. Is this going to be enough to avert some of these tariffs that the president's been talking about instituting?
Certainly, we are encouraged by President Xi's words and his kind words, but at the same time, we want to see concrete actions from China, and we're going to continue moving forward in the process and in the negotiations until those happen. Pamela?
Has the president spoken with Michael Cohen since the raids?
Not that I'm aware of.
And can I just ask you, you said that he believes, he views this as sort of crossing the line. Can you explain a little bit more why these raids on his personal attorney is viewed by the president as crossing the line?
I don't have anything else to add on that front right now. Right here in the front.
Clarify something you said earlier. You said the president believes he has the power to fire Robert Mueller because usually most legal experts believe that he would have to order Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein to fire Mueller, and Rosenstein could, of course, refuse.
I know a number of individuals in the legal community, and including at the Department of Justice, that he has the power to do so, but I don't have any further announcements on.
They said that it is. They've told me I've asked. They've said that it's Rod Rosenstein oversees special counsel, and only he has the power to fire the special counsel.
Again, we've been advised that the president certainly has the power to make that decision. I can't go anything beyond that. Dave?
Sarah, thanks. The British government said they're still looking for confirmation that Assad used chemical weapons last weekend. Is the president still looking for confirmation of that?
I can't get into specific classified information, but I can tell you we feel confident in the comments that we've made up until this point. John?
Thank you, Sarah. Two questions with brevity on Ambassador Bolton. With the
We'll believe it when we see it, right?
resignations of Michael Anton and now Tom Bossert, can we expect any other changes of personnel in his family?
I don't have any other personnel announcements to make at this time, but we'll
The
certainly
other
keep you guys
question-
posted.
Right. A year ago, Ambassador Bolton was highly critical in op-ed pages about U.S. involvement with the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. With the World Bank IMF meeting coming up within a matter of 2 weeks, is his position going to affect U.S. support for either institution?
I don't have any policy changes on that front at this time and don't expect any on that front. Francesca?
Thank you, Sarah. Yesterday, President Trump said something very interesting about Syria. He said that because of the power of the United States and because of the power of our country, we're able to stop it. Now, with bringing in Ambassador John Bolton as well, which is sort of a signal of a more hawkish stance potentially, I want to know if the president has changed his calculus in any way on Syria and on whether or not he wants to pull out those troops very soon, as he previously said.
I addressed the troops yesterday. I don't have anything new on that front in terms of things that the president may or may not do. We're not going to broadcast, and I don't have any announcements on that front. Fred?
Oh, thanks, sir. This week, Senator McConnell said they're taking up 6 nominations, and that they're going to continue taking up 6 nominations per week. Do you consider that a major breakthrough for the administration, considering there's been
We'd like to
so
see
many
them
blocks?
take on a lot more than 6, but we're certainly glad to see those 6 move forward, but we'd like to see them move forward in a much bigger fashion than just the single digits right now.
And one other question. On U.S. Attorney Berman, he's in an interim position now in New York. Reports have been that the president was going to nominate him for full-time. Is that still the case? Will the president nominate him?
I don't have any personnel announcements on that front. Sayer?
Thanks, Sarah. So all of the evidence so far in the Syrian chemical attack points to the use of chlorine gas. The Assad regime has been suspected of using chlorine multiple times on the battlefield. What makes this particular attack different and warrant the international response and the potential use of lethal force that we're seeing from this president?
I can't address specific intelligence matters, but I think everyone around the world can see why these recent attacks are so horrific. Beyond that, I can't get into any other details. Eamon?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. To clarify your comment here on Xi Jinping's speech last night, it was seen as rhetoric around trade openness. And are you saying that the president didn't see anything in that speech that would encourage him to back off on his threat to impose tariffs on the Chinese?
We certainly think it's a step.
All right, that's been Sarah Sanders at the White House briefing room. A busy day on both ends of Capitol Hill and the White House on Pennsylvania Avenue. Let's now go to Mark Zuckerberg. He is about to take the swear that he will tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The members of the Senate, the chairman and ranking members, have been taking turns with their opening statements. Senator Nelson is about to wrap that up now, and then we will have Mark Zuckerberg giving his first testimony. There behind him, Joel Kaplan and Mariah Jordan, who work for Facebook and have been preparing Mark Zuckerberg for this moment. Let's turn it back over to Senator Grassley.
So proceed, sir.
Chairman Grassley, Chairman Thune, Ranking Member Feinstein, and Ranking Member Nelson, and members of the committee. We face a number of important issues around privacy, safety, and democracy, and you will rightfully have some hard questions for me to answer. Before I talk about the steps we're taking to address them, I want to talk about how we got here. Facebook is an idealistic and optimistic company. For most of our existence, we focused on all of the good that connecting people can do. And as Facebook has grown, people everywhere have gotten a powerful new tool for staying connected to the people they love, for making their voices heard, and for building communities and businesses. Just recently, we've seen the Me Too movement and the March for Our Lives organized, at least in part, on Facebook. After Hurricane Harvey, people came together to raise more than $20 million for relief. And more than 70 million small businesses use Facebook to create jobs and grow. But it's clear now that we didn't do enough to prevent these tools from being used for harm as well. And that goes for fake news, for foreign interference in elections, and hate speech, as well as developers and data privacy. We didn't take a broad enough view of our responsibility, and that was a big mistake. And it was my mistake, and I'm sorry. I started Facebook, I run it, and I'm responsible for what happens here. So now, we have to go through all of our relationship with people and make sure that we're taking a broad enough view of our responsibility. It's not enough to just connect people. We have to make sure that those connections are positive. It's not enough to just give people a voice. We need to make sure that people aren't using it to harm other people or to spread misinformation. And it's not enough to just give people control over their information. We need to make sure that the developers they share it with protect their information too. Across the board, we have a responsibility to not just build tools, but to make sure that they're used for good. It will take some time to work through all the changes we need to make across the company, but I'm committed to getting this right. This includes the basic responsibility of protecting people's information, which we failed to do with Cambridge Analytica. So here are a few things that we are doing to address this and to prevent it from happening again. First, we're getting to the bottom of exactly what Cambridge Analytica did and telling everyone affected. What we know now is that Cambridge Analytica improperly accessed some information about millions of Facebook members by buying it from an app developer. That information, this was information that people generally share publicly on their Facebook pages, like names and their profile picture and the pages they follow. When we first contacted Cambridge Analytica, they told us that they had deleted the data. About a month ago, we heard new reports that suggested that wasn't true. And now we're working with governments in the US, the UK, around the world to do a full audit of what they've done and to make sure they get rid of any data they may still have. Second, to make sure no other app developers out there are misusing data, we're now investigating every single app that had access to a large amount of information in the past. And if we find that someone improperly used data, we're going to ban them from Facebook and tell everyone affected. Third, to prevent this from ever happening again going forward, we're making sure that developers can access as much information now. The good news here is that we already made big changes to our platform in 2014 that would have prevented this specific situation with Cambridge Analytica from occurring again today. But there's more to do, and you can find more details on the steps we're taking in my written statement. My top priority has always been our social mission of connecting people, building community, and bringing the world closer together. Advertisers and developers will never take priority over that as long as I'm running Facebook. I started Facebook when I was in college. We've come a long way since then. We now serve more than 2 billion people around the world, and every day, people use our services to stay connected with the people that matter to them most. I believe deeply in what we're doing, and I know that when we address these challenges, we'll look back and view helping people connect and giving more people a voice as a positive force in the world. I realize the issues we're talking about today aren't just issues for Facebook and our community. They're issues and challenges for all of us as Americans. Thank you for having me here today, and I'm ready to take your questions.
I'll remind members that maybe you weren't here when I had my opening comments that we are operating under the 5-minute rule, and that applies to the 5-minute rule, and that applies to those of us who are chairing the committee as well. I start with you. Facebook handles extensive amounts of personal data for billions of users. A significant amount of that data is shared with third-party developers who utilize your platform. Has this